Today we're going to be talking about using financing contingencies, how we use closing costs, and we're going to have some questions about financing contingencies in general. Some folks, on the call are actually from my office. So Megan, Susan, Amy, y'all see me a lot. So,
hey there.
How are you?
Good. Sitting with my accountability partner.
Are you? Y'all are
Yeah.
both here together?
Oh yeah, baby.
Yeah. Two separate accounts on. That's great though. All right.
We wanted to boost your numbers.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Always all about support.
Important. All right. So I'm gonna give a few, just about 30 more seconds, and then we'll get started. All right. So first thing, let's talk about financing contingencies in general, just what they are. Does anyone, before we do anything, does anyone have any questions about financing contingencies, what they mean, what the purpose of them for, how they work? Does anyone have any general questions about them before I go through this? I'm not going to cover every line of the documents. That's not the point of doing this. Hey, Nancy. That's not the point of doing this. The point of this class is kind of to give you some strategies involved with the loan contingencies, and also to understand exactly how we use those. And having Nancy Grieve on is actually fantastic because she's a lender, so she can even help us out a little bit with any questions. So before we get started, does anyone have any general questions or specific about financing contingencies that you want to ask? You can just holler it out. No one has
a question. This
Go
is
ahead.
Deidre.
Sure.
And usually on the, let's just say the conventional loan exhibit, sometimes I get a little confused as to which one should be the longer contingency period. Should it be the financing contingency or the appraisal? Because I feel like the loan can't get approved if the appraisal doesn't come up to what it's supposed to be. So I don't know which one I should give the amount of time to.
So yeah, it's a great question. Actually, that question came up last week in a real life situation. So first thing I'll hit on this, the financing contingency, the appraisal contingency allows you out regardless. So normally the appraisal contingency is shorter and the financing is longer, but there is not necessarily a specific reason why we do that, because on the financing contingency or on the appraisal contingency, if it doesn't appraise, you have the right to ask for a price reduction, and then the seller has the right to respond, and then we have the right to respond back to that. So it's kind of interesting. Most people think that date it has to be all negotiated. That's not true. So I've had a situation where my client was fully 100% underwritten by their lender completely. Everything was done. The only thing they were waiting on was property. In that case, we actually did longer financing than we did longer appraisal than we did financing, because we didn't really need a financing contingency, unless there's a problem with the property. So generally, the answer is the appraisal should be shorter, financing should be longer, but there are cases where it's the other way, where it could make sense to be the other way. I've always done it appraisal shorter, financing longer. Does anyone else in the group have an opinion or a comment on that?
Good morning, or I guess good afternoon.
Hey, Brian. This is Barbara Dyer out of the Atlanta Classic office, and
Sure.
I generally do mine the other way around, because when I write my offers and my contracts, my clients have gone through underwriting. So I know that they are totally approved. They've already submitted bank statements, tax returns, pay stubs. So I know that they are 100% approved, and it's the appraisal that I'm waiting on right now. But I do agree that either way, whatever is going to work out better for the client. But I generally do my vice versa. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, Barbara. It's a great point. And that's why in the situation we had, and Megan, I'll come to you in just a second. The situation we had last week, I mean, my client was completely underwritten. Like I had a commitment letter from their bank pending the appraisal. So in that case, I didn't even need financing contingency at all. It was done. So, you know, that does make sense. Now, if there's a condo or condo approval situation, you do want to give longer time for financing, because the condo approval has nothing to do with the appraised value of the property. All right, it's not part of that. So that's part of the financing. If you have a condo, you should really make sure it's longer. In my case, for my situation, the condo was already approved by that lender. That lender had just done one last month and they didn't need it at all. So Megan, go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I was just going to say, I usually talk to the lender about that and ask them, you know, what they think in that situation and how much time we need, because I wouldn't know what to get. You know, I feel like they're the ones that are kind of guiding that. And then my question, you'd said that earlier about the appraisal, that as long as it's negotiated, you start it. Did you say as long as you start the negotiation before the end of the appraisal date, or is that what you said? Yeah.
We'll look at it in a second specifically, because
Okay.
there's this misconception that you have to have everything settled by the end of the appraisal contingency. That is not correct. That's not correct at all. That's not what the form says. It says we must present a request to lower the price prior to that date. And there's actually a back and forth. So we're going to look at that wording in a minute, but there is a misconception about that. So, you know, and we'll kind of go through that here as well. But yeah, Barbara, you know, if I could get every client of mine fully underwritten and approved prior to making an offer, that would be the best and ideal situation. Actually, it'd be better if they just had cash. I didn't have to worry about any of these forms at all.
Right.
So I have one question. I have a few questions for y'all, and just holler out the answer. Okay. Question number one, if there is not a loan contingency of any type in the contract, what does that mean?
You're paying cash.
All cash.
You're paying cash, and what else?
You're all the way through underwriting.
Well, if you're paying cash, then you don't have to go through underwriting.
Right.
You need
So-
It also means too, right, that if your lender does not approve you, you're not able to get your earnest money back.
That's correct. What else? One more thing.
No appraisal.
No appraisal. You have no protections for your client. Should you ever write an offer without a contingency of some sort dealing with financing?
No.
I 100% agree. Even if they have cash, you still would like to have something. So what form do we use if they're paying all cash?
The all cash contingent, or the all cash.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
all cash one, F401. So it's funny because the way you see this is 401 is of course the very first one because it's the one we want, right? It's like F101 is the most important document we have because it's a listing agreement. F201 is the most important document we have when we're writing a contract because it's the actual buyer purchase and sell agreement. But then F401, I mean, really it'd be fantastic if we do F201, F401, nothing else, and would be fantastic. That would be ideal. That's not the real world. But that is what we want to, we want to go for. So can you do and I'm going to share the screen in a second. Can you do an offer without any exhibit at all? Can you do it?
Yes.
Sure, you can. Can anyone tell me a reason why you might want to do that versus having some sort of exhibit, even the all cash exhibit? I agree. I don't think you should either. Like literally, I assume that the lack of an answer means that the answer is no. I'm gonna go that direction. So let's look at a few things first. And I'm going to share my screen as long as it will let me share screen. I think it will. So I'm going to share screen and I'm going to do a few things to let you see this. The first thing we're going to talk about, can y'all see my screen? It says contingency, loan contingency. Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So the first thing I want to show you is this. This document is the maximum seller concessions allowed for, I actually have USDA on here, which I've never done a USDA loan ever. Even if those of you who don't know me, I'm the PC coach in Atlanta, in Decatur, and I also used to be a lender for 12 years. So I never did a USDA ever in my entire career. So let's look at some maximum seller concessions or contributions. For VA, it is 4% for all loans. FHA, it's 6% for all FHA loans. Conventional is when it gets kind of wonky because you, of course, can only use concessions for, depending on the amount of money they have put down. So an example is investment properties, it's 2% maximum, period, right? But it's 9% if they're putting down 25% or more. That's a lot. That's a lot of seller contributions. And then 6% if you're 10 to 25, 3% if you're less than 10%. Do y'all all have this? Do y'all all know this?
No.
All right, so what I'll do in a minute is, Jackie, I will put this into the GroupMe chat so you can get a copy of this. But this is standard, and your lender should always, it should be an easy question to ask your lender. But here's one I have. USDA is 6% of the loan amount versus the appraised value. If you look at this, concessions are based on the appraised value or sales price, not the actual loan amount. All right, USDA is the only one that's based on the loan amount, 6% of the loan amount versus 6% of the appraised or sales price. So keep that in mind as well. So I'll drop this into the chat so you've got it. All right. So first thing, let's look at the all cash exhibit quickly. And I'll tell you, we made a huge improvement to this a couple of years ago because it used to just be dumb. It made no sense whatsoever, but we have two options here, option A or B. One is it's an all cash purchase, period. You have cash and the buyer, this is very important, the buyer has no right to extend the closing date for 8 days for reasons of mortgage lender delay. All right. The buyer shall have the right to extend if the attorney's not ready, there's a title issue or whatever, but the buyer has no right to extend because of a mortgage lender delay in method A1 or 1A. In B or method 1B, you have a finance purchase with no financing contingency. That means that they are going to get a loan. What type of loan do you think you would use this with?
Probably conventional.
Like a what?
Conventional one?
You would not use this with conventional at all.
Hard
money. Hard money.
Hard money. Right. So this is what you would use in the case of a hard money loan. So the thing with B is, even though the buyer is obtaining a mortgage loan, the buyer has no right to unilaterally extend the closing date for 8 days due to a mortgage reason. Again, if you use this form, there's no right to extend because of a mortgage problem. All right. Verification of funds on 2 talks about how many days you have from binding agreement to verify all the funds available. What do y'all think y'all should put in there?
I usually put 3 days because if they're paying cash, they should have their.
Same here. I use 3.
Y'all are nice because I don't.
I use 1 day because I don't want to submit the offer without the pre-approval.
Mine's 0. So it does make sense that, I've got an old bank statement from 2 months ago. Okay, fine. It makes me happy. However, 2 months ago, they could have blown the money the next day by buying, some Madonna tickets or whatever they're doing. But verification of funds, I would not drag that out, guys. I would not drag it out more than 1 day. And honestly, I don't present any offer without having cash in hand or a pre-qual letter. So that's a situation where I really think the answer is 0. But he may choose 1 or 2. But don't let this drag out. I mean, you've got a deal that's basically not even truly funded yet. And so it concerns me. I would really have to have a good exception to make me happy. 5 is an appraisal contingency. Why would we have an appraisal contingency on an all cash deal?
Sometimes the buyers just want to make sure that the property that they're purchasing will appraise, or the value is there. I would say the value is there.
Sure. So some people think the value's there. As a listing agent, you won't get this from me. If you're paying cash, you agree to the price.
Mm-hmm.
This is my opinion. I mean, and this is where we can discuss this however you want to. But to me, if you're presenting an all cash deal and the price you have presented to me, that is the price that I believe that you've told me you think it's worth. So to me, the minute you add an appraisal contingency back to an all cash, does it really make it an all cash offer?
No, because the property is worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
Correct. That's Sparkle. That's my view. Now, there could be a situation, again, it depends on you and your client specifically, that you would want that there may be a reason for an appraisal. In other words, basically the seller and the buyer have gone back and forth, and maybe they can't come to an agreement. They say, okay, our agreement's based on the appraisal coming in at this price or not. That's fine. But honestly, to me as a listing agent, a all cash exhibit with an appraisal contingency is no different than a conventional loan. That's fully approved.
Brian, are you saying if we have a buyer that is obtaining a conventional loan and the lender has said they don't have to have any finance contingency, that we would use this form?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
The only reason you just use this form is if the person has cash or hard money.
Okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding for 2023. Thanks.
Right. Now, for me, this is just me personally as a broker. I am not going to accept this offer with appraisal contingency unless there's some huge discrepancy between, I'm not going to accept it typically. That's going to be a negotiating point. That's my opinion. Who should select the appraiser?
The buyer.
The buyer,
buyer.
the lender.
The lender.
There's no lender. This deal has no lender.
Oh, the buyer.
Oh, on this form. Sorry. I was thinking of just in
We're
general.
in all cash world. Yeah, we're in all cash world. Now, the other one, see, it has buyer, seller, or other. So if there was a hard money lender that required that they have an appraisal, what would we put right there under B, other?
Lender.
The lender. Right, makes sense. So the only time you would have an all cash exhibit with an appraisal contingency would really be if there was a hard money type lender. That's the only time it makes sense to me. This is my opinion. And of course, I'll always have the option of, and this is a discussion.
Hey, Brian,
Yep.
sorry, really quickly, when you were saying you wouldn't accept the offer if they had the appraisal contingency, so would you say, hey, you need to remove this, or we're not going to? I mean, I'm just curious, how would that look like for you?
I would counter, and I would say, in my counter offer, it would say that the appraisal contingency listed on exhibit whatever is 0 or nothing.
Okay.
That's what I would do. I mean, to me, if you're making a cash offer to me, the only reason we have appraisal contingencies is because the lender requires them, right? To me, that's my view. But so if I get this is a regular old house, normal standard, priced appropriately for the market. To me, what makes an all cash exhibit strong is when there's no appraisal. Barbara?
Okay, Brian, I just wanted to kind of play this out a little bit.
Sure.
Off of the lady's question, I believe it was Megan. Because if you accept the appraisal as part of this document, this F401, if the appraisal is part of the agreement to this document, then that puts you into a financing contingency. Am I right, Brian?
Not a financing contingency. It puts you into it weakens the offer. You know, if it doesn't appraise, then you have the right to do what's in section C, which is ask for a price reduction.
Okay,
If you're getting an appraisal for your own happiness and joy, fine. But if it's contingent, if the deal is contingent on it's not strong. I'm sorry. The whole purpose of a cash deal is that it is strong, right?
right, right.
Strongest deal out there is cash, no contingencies, right?
Right,
Second strongest offer out there is cash with a contingency, which is no different than, to me, a conventional with a lot of money down. So that's how I see it, both from being a lender and also from this. So let's say that, and I'll just wait till the next section to cover this part, but realistically from this document, you can go through the whole process of asking for a price reduction if and only if there's an appraisal contingency allowed in the all cash exhibit. I don't do that. I don't accept them. And I think if you're, Sparkle said it best, if you made an offer at $400,000, I expect you to pay $400,000 for the house. So, okay. Any questions about the all cash exhibit or any confusion you have about that?
the only thing I want to add to it is if you guys notice, Brian, you probably don't know, but I sit on the forms committee.
Mhm.
And so we changed the title to no financing contingency, but I just sent them a message because I noticed at the bottom, we still have an all cash exhibit.
Yeah, I saw that too, that here, it says it right there, but up here. And I really like the idea that y'all changed that. So Barbara, y'all did a great job of saying to no financing contingency besides an all cash contingency. But it does look, if you look at the title and this up here, what says F401 all cash, that's literally how you find it in Remine. All right. So I have a question for you. What two loan types have an amendatory clause?
FHA and BA.
BI.
Barbara, you can't answer every question.
Okay, yes, sir. I'm just gonna put myself on mute, Brian.
No, you can comment all you want to, but you can't answer all the good questions. All right.
Gotcha.
So which two have an amendatory clause?
FHA and VA.
Right. So what does the amendatory clause say? What's the basic, clear as mud explanation of what the amendatory clause says? What does
The
it
house
say?
has to appraise for the purchase price or contract price.
It has to. We're gonna look at that.
Okay.
He's basically correct. And so here's the point of it. It has to appraise for the agreed upon price, and we're going to look at the difference between the FHA and the VA to see if there is a difference. It used to be that FHA, we'll look at them together, but I'll just show you. So the amendatory clause says it has to appraise, period, right? That's a quick, clear understanding of that. So if it doesn't appraise, what happens? If it
Well,
doesn't
either
appraise,
the
what
seller
happens?
has to reduce the price or the buyer has to agree to bring the difference in the gap, whatever the gap is.
So here is the FHA loan contingency. The amendatory clause for FHA is very clear in here. You literally have to put the amount it must appraise for. So let's say that you're negotiating back and forth and you made an offer at 400,000 and then the counter offer came in at 410 and you didn't change the amendatory clause when you countered. What happened? I made an offer at 400,000, you countered back at 410, but we left the amendatory clause at 400,000. What happened? What did we just do to our seller, to our buyer?
Gave them an out.
Made them responsible for paying that 10,000 out of their pocket.
Right. It didn't give them an out. We literally hurt them.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. This says that property must not appraise for less than 400,000, but our contract price is 410. Who's got to come up with a difference?
Got it.
The buyer. So this is the biggest screw up we have when we have counteroffers with FHA, because so many people forget. Some people forget to change this part. And when you counter offer anything, don't assume that item 12 of the FHA loan exhibit automatically goes to the purchase price. So many people have screwed over their clients, sorry for my language, but it's the truth, because they didn't do this part right here. Because if this thing appraises for 400,000 and you agreed to buy it at 500,000, you got to come up with $100,000.
So you're saying, Brian, that as soon as that appraisal comes in, and if the price is different, then you need to adjust it, or you need to do an amendment to adjust it.
Well, what I'm saying is you can't have a counteroffer without changing the amendatory clause. When you have a contract that's a purchase and sale agreement and an FHA, you make an offer at 400,000. You put $400,000 on this form, right? And let's say that they counter offer to you that says our purchase price is 410,000. Don't sign the counter offer unless this amendatory clause is addressed.
I got you. I follow you. I thought you were saying something else. Okay, thanks.
And you can also, you can put this in the, you can either change it, or you can put it in the counter offer that says the amendatory clause item 12 of exhibit, whatever exhibit number you've given it, this matches the purchase price, or this is changed to 410,000. So many FHA counter offers do not have the language in there properly.
So I have a question.
Yep.
The question is, the lender, since you're on the financing side as well, the lender has their own version of the amendatory clause that doesn't have a particular value that you enter. So if that's the case, and there is a counter situation, what supersedes what? Does the contract, or does the lender version of the amendatory clause supersede?
So if the lender has their own version, some do, some do not. Whatever signed last overrides. Does that make sense, Nick?
Say it one more time.
Whichever one was signed last overrides.
Okay, so the lender was signed last, then that supersedes the original amendatory clause that was signed on the contingency form. Okay, I got it.
Right, but Nick, not all lenders have their own amendatory clause. Most of them use this form. That's the purpose of it.
I have a question. Is there ever a time where they would purposely be different when you were making that first offer? I mean, I've never run into it, but I'm just throwing it out there.
No, I don't. There's no time. It's just sloppy contract writing. I don't know that there's ever a time, unless they're basically willing to pay. They're willing to pay more than it appraises for. It does not make sense to do that. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's funny, Carlin, because I think honestly this form should match the contract price. My personal opinion, I didn't write the form. But there we are. So let's go to VA real quick.
Question, Brian.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that I have that correct. So with the amendatory clause, just for clarification, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. If they do not equal, if the amount in the clause is different from the amount on the purchase and sale agreement, the purchase and sale agreement will supersede, or it, no, I see you shaking your head, no. So
No,
the mandatory clause area, whatever's written there is what supersedes.
Is what's controlling the appraisal amount.
Okay.
All right.
So,
Your purchase price is on page 1 of the PSA. Period.
correct.
All right. But if this amendatory clause is for less than, so here's the situation. I wrote a contract for 410. My amendatory clause says 400,000. The appraisal comes in at 400,000. Who has to pay the difference?
The buyer.
Right.
The buyer.
Right.
Okay.
So we really just put our buyer in a position where they're already putting down 3.5%. And then, so this is very, very, because there's two amendatory clauses. There's one for FHA and there's one for VA, and they are different. And I just want to make sure that we know that there's a difference, because what will happen is the last deal you did was VA, you don't think about having the amendatory clause, or the last deal you had was FHA, you don't think about, but there's two different amendatory clauses. They're not the same document. All right. They're not the same. It's the same thing, basically. Period. But if you look here on FHA, this amendatory clause shall apply even when the financing contingency period has terminated. That means the appraisal can come back whenever it wants to. Okay. Let's flip over to the VA version. And basically, this says that the purchase price or cost exceeds reasonable value of the property established by the VA. Buyer shall, however, have the privilege and option of proceeding with a consummation of the agreement without regard to the amount, without the price. In other words, they can pay more. But the VA version of this basically says, hey, look, it has to appraise for purchase price. FHA, you have to put the amount in. This is where we get screwed up.
Okay, and so I think I heard someone ask, but I didn't get the answer. I didn't hear the answer, but I know you did answer it. They asked if it was an out. So if it does not match, you cannot, of course, terminate, because the appraisal came in at 4, but we're under contract for 410, and the amendatory clause says 4. You can't terminate for that reason. It's expected that the buyer comes up with the difference.
Exactly, 100% correct.
Okay, and that's how that amendatory, I'm gonna go back and read that section just to make sure for clarity and understanding, but I just wanted to verbalize that to hear myself say it.
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. So the issue here is that basically FHA is not going to insure the property. All right. So it's a problem. So we really have to be careful. This should match. I honestly don't understand why there's two different versions of this, but there are. All right. So that's keep that. So any questions on the fact that we want to make sure that the FHA matches, number one, and number two, the VA automatically has it match? What's the appraisal contingency time frame on a VA or FHA?
There is
The entire contract to the
there's no
close.
appraisal contingency.
Until closing. Until closing. This amendatory clause shall apply even when the financing contingency period has terminated. That's in both sets of languages. So there is no appraisal contingency date on either document, FHA or VA. What loan requires that there be a termite letter?
VA.
VA.
Who has to pay for it?
VA. Seller.
Is that correct?
I think either one can, either one can pay for it.
Either party can pay for it.
Yeah, either party can pay for it. It's right here in number 15. There is a misconception that the seller has to pay for the WDO. That is, or the wood infestation report. That is not correct. It is in 15. The buyer or seller have to agree. Also, I am not going to accept a contract unless this is filled in with buyer or seller. Who normally pays for it? Seller. But if you ever use a VA loan to buy a bank-owned property, or you're using a VA loan to buy a property that's involved in a relocation company, they're not going to pay for that at all. So the buyer ends up doing it. So either one is allowed to pay for it. Does that make sense? It's a pretty common misconception that the seller has to pay for it. What is a fee that the buyer cannot pay for in VA? Do you know what it is?
The transfer tax. Or is that what you call it?
I bet Ann or Nancy knows.
Don't test me, Brian. I was about to tell you what a great class and have to jump off.
Tax service fee. So the VA,
I know
the
it's
VA
tax
client is not
something.
supposed to pay the tax service fee. It's a little small thing, but it's weird, but just remember that. But as far as the termite letter, and I think at one time, maybe a few years back, it actually had the seller pays for it, but that's not correct anymore. So just so you know, it can be either one. All right.
By the way, Brian, I do have to jump off shortly. I just want to tell you what a great, fantastic class. I do think Ann has joined. So if y'all have additional questions, and certainly when you first started, getting everything pre-underwritten probably saves a whole lot of headaches with a lot of people. So anyway, thanks. It's great being partners with you guys.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I had a maintenance person, but if you need anything, I'll just let me know.
Sure. Perfect. Glad to have you on. All right. So any questions about VA or FHA?
Nope. Thank you.
I have a question for you then. What is the VA upfront fee? 13. What fee goes in there?
I'm not gonna answer.
What's the VA upfront fee? If you wrote a VA contract right now, y'all are all telling me, except for Barbara, that none of you can write a VA contract. That's literally what y'all are telling me.
I will check with the lender and see what they had to say because they should know.
It
It's normally a
depends on
2%.
their,
It's a 2% funding fee. The upfront
It
fee is 2% funding fee that the VA has on contracts.
I
So-
think it depends on your entitlement, like if you've used it before and if you're fully disabled. Because if you're fully 100% disabled, there is no funding fee.
Right.
But yes,
So the
check with
standard-
your lender.
Right, check with your lender. The standard funding fee is 1.75. And it changes based on if you use some of your eligibility and if you were completely like Ann said, but check with your lender. They can look at the COE to know exactly what it is. But if you didn't know otherwise and you were writing an offer at 3 o'clock in the morning, because you're silly when we do this, but we do it all the time. I would put in 1.75. So that's the standard fee. Normally they don't pay it in full at closing. Normally they pay it as B, and it used to be the actual 1.75 was listed here, but just so you know, most people add it to the loan amount. And do you see anyone who pays it up front? Is that common?
No, I don't. Everybody adds it into the loan.
Right. That's pretty common. So, but it's not on the form anymore. The 1.75 is no longer there. But it used to be an amount was you had to list the amount on there. So understand that most people are going to put B, and C would be only used basically if they're completely disabled. But on their certificate of eligibility, it will tell them what it is. Right. But just the question, what should that number be? Approximately 1.75, or it is 1.75 for most people.
Now,
Right.
I was thinking that number should be, that's on the FHA. The 1.75 for the FHA amount that has to be added or paid in upfront. FHA contingency. I've never put it down for a veteran.
Yep. Sorry, you were exactly correct. I flipped it around. Sorry.
Isn't it 2.4?
VA is 2%.
Yeah. All right. So that's, we flipped it around. I was looking at the wrong form and went to the wrong direction. So the upfront fee here is typically 1.75. Sorry, that was my mistake.
Correct.
I knew that.
All right. So there we go.
I'm trying to see if you're paying attention.
Huh? Yeah. Oh, I know. Well, I laid this all out this morning, every question I was going to ask, and then I read my notes wrong like an idiot. So there we go. That's why you always check everything regardless. All right. Barbara, you have a question?
No, just a comment,
Just a what?
a comment.
Go ahead.
Okay, my comment is on that VA funding fee. If they are disabled, they will not have it, but if they also serve in wartime, they won't have the funding fee also.
Okay. So I think Ann's answer is probably the best one overall. Check with the lender. They'll know exactly what it is too. All right. So any questions at all about financing? I'm not covering USDA because how many of y'all have USDA loans?
Hey, Brian,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yep.
So, going back to the no finance contingency exhibit, I understand that if someone is all the way through underwriting, that they wouldn't use that form, but what form would they use and how would they fill it out?
Conventional.
And you just put 0 days for finance contingency?
I mean, you can put 0 days if you want to, but you can also have a standard. I mean, if they're fully, completely underwritten, and I would, this is a thing where you have to trust your lender because, some lender from out of state who you don't know, who you've never heard of, who's on the West Coast, they may not, they may say, oh yeah, they're fully underwritten, but actually they're not fully underwritten. How do we know if they're fully underwritten? So I don't ever use the all cash exhibit for someone who's getting, if you're getting a loan, you should use the proper loan type. All right.
Okay.
The only time you use all cash is when it's cash or hard money. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So
And
if I've got someone
yeah.
who's getting a conventional loan or a jumbo loan, I'm not going to use the all cash or the no financing contingency. Why?
Brian, did you bring up the if they are fully approved and it's a condo, just to have a stip in there to cover, because the condo approval is separate from a finance, like it's part of the financing. So if a lender can't get approval on a condo and you're waiving everything, you need to have a stip or add 14 days or something to cover the condo approval.
Right. And we haven't brought it up, but I'm glad you did. Here's I told a situation of one I had the other day where the building was, the lender was already said the building's already approved. So they didn't have to have that. So that was good. It's also rare that they have that anymore, or seemingly. But you do, if you're getting a condo, you do need to have some special step that says something along the lines of either the building must be acceptable to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, that you have extra time to get that approval done. I've seen a bunch of different steps for that. And I've seen it just having a really long financing tendency. But also, when your lender, don't hold those contracts back from your lender. If you go under contract on, Friday afternoon, I'm going to still send it to my lender, my closing attorney, and everything else. My lender may, pick up the file over the weekend. And you don't want them holding back, especially if it's a condo, because of the length of period of time that it could take, because it's basically the condo association themselves. Some condo associations are fantastic and some of them are horrible, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't want to put our clients in a situation where their condo is not approvable or approved, especially with what happened with, a couple years ago with the place in Miami that really concerned people. So a special step, either stating that the property must be acceptable for FHA, for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or a lengthy period of time for the financing contingency. Anyone have questions about that? No questions.
I have questions about that, and I'm sorry. I'm Brenda Lee Foster. I'm joining you late, and I'm not Zoomable, presentable, but I got a couple of questions for you. Number one, when are you going to have this class again?
It depends on whenever Tom wants us to do the financing contingency part again. So I don't have a date and time, but there's a broker call every Monday with different topics.
Okay. And also, did you talk about the 100% FHA loan?
We didn't. Today's class is on just understanding the financing contingencies, not the loan products themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you handle those?
I'm not a lender. I'm a broker.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
Excuse me.
Yeah, you're fine. That's fine.
Okay. Can I throw out something
Sure.
that may be helpful to get listings? Found this out in a class, but it makes sense that when the rates dropped down really low, was it last year or year before last? In any case, FHA, VA, and USDA are qualifying assumable loans. So if a buyer's got cash and they can qualify for a loan, and of course the seller would have to check with their servicer, but they may be able to close it quicker. We may be able to close the deal quicker by the buyer assuming the loan, and that's must be owner occupied. Just
Right.
throwing that out.
Yep. So if there's assumability feature on the type of loan, which is typically would be FHA or VA, then that can be used in that case. So yeah.
And we checked this USDA also, the government-backed loans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But conventional is
Thank
not.
you.
Sure.
Conventionals. Now there's one thing, if they're pre-foreclosure, I would say have the seller beg the servicer to see if maybe they would allow some kind of work around that. So it might be negotiable, but don't take my word for it. I get the seller to really beg the servicer to see what they would do.
Okay. Any other
Great
questions?
class.
Any other questions about the forms? All right. So what mistake did Brian make today?
Of course, Brian didn't make any mistakes.
Oh, yes, he did. Yes, he did. No, literally, call it out. I mean, this is how you're going to learn from it. I mean, literally, I looked at them backwards. So what was the mistake that Brian made today? So you don't make it yourself. Julius knows.
Yeah, about the VA and the FHA.
Right. So FHA is based on 1.75%. VA is based on whatever their COE is, which is standard. It's different than 1.75. So just keep that in mind that I want to make sure that part's clear, that when I was explaining it, I was explaining on the wrong loan. So that's my fault. Yes, Barbara Dyer.
Okay, this will probably be my last comment, Brian. I'm gonna try real hard to just make this the last one. Under number 1A, I wanted everyone to notice that we made a change in that interest rate column. You notice it says not greater than. Previously, that is not what it said.
Okay.
Yeah. Because with that column right there, not greater than, because before, if you would put in a lower interest rate than what we currently have now, it was a good possibility to void out your contract. For instance, if we're in 6% now and somebody put in there 4% and we don't have any 4% interest rates, but see, we changed the language now so it says not greater than. So anything you put in even lower will still keep your contract valid.
Good. Any other questions?
So should you check with the lender to see what percentage to put in there?
Absolutely. So to me, let me ask a question for the group. This is
Wait, say that again, Brian. I didn't hear what you said.
Check with the lender. Check with the lender as to what interest rate you should put in here. Right. I mean, if the client has a 4% interest rate, which they don't have today, I mean, you need to put in something close to what's accurate, right? But we know that the loan's not actually locked in until they actually lock in the loan. So interest rate's not decided upon. So, one of the things I've heard kind of throughout this, I don't make an offer without talking to my lender. And it's a text message or whatever. And so like on conventional, when I'm trying to figure out, like here, length of time to reduce sales price and also length of time for the the financing number 3 and 4 on the conventional, I always have a conversation with my lender about what are y'all running right now. Does that make sense? Do y'all do that too?
Always. Second call is, or first call is to the lender to say, what can I do for the interest rate? What's my finance contingency? What are you running on appraisals? And that way, at least I know we're on the same page from the start, and
Right.
you work with lenders, it works out just fine.
Right.
And that's with, not just FHA or VA, that would be with anyone.
Yeah, that's anybody. That's anybody. This is to me best practices whenever you're using any lender at all. And that's one of the reasons why I really, I'm big on local lenders. I'm big on local appraisers. I really have a major issue with my clients picking some rando, mortgage company off the internet from, Utah or something like that. Because I had a situation a few months ago where I literally asked the lender 4 separate times, how many days do you need for appraisal? And they couldn't really give me an answer. And I'm like, and the answer was, well, it depends. I said, what does it depend on? So for me, I just personally couldn't stand that. It drives me nuts. I mean, and I talked to a lender recently who was on a lender who I normally use. My client picked them. I did some checking with this lender, and they've been actually very, very good, very fantastic. But when I emailed the lender, I said, hey, my name is Brian Crawford. I represent our mutual client. I was a lender for 12 years. I'm here to make your job as easy as possible. What are you running for appraisals? And the answer was, we will send out an appraisal request. They're typically picked up within 2 days, and they come back about 5 days later. So that told me 7 days. So I put in 10. Right, in case there's a weekend or something like that, or something crazy happened. So that's just part of a normal conversation with a lender, and I hope that that's part of what y'all are doing too, is that you're not making any offer without, like Carlin said, the 3 things: what rate should I put down? What are you running for financing contingency, and what are you running for appraisals? And it changes, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Lender to lender.
Yeah, well, lender to lender, and also time of the year.
Yes.
I mean, if it's
Yes.
April and the lender's doing 20 transactions per loan officer, and they've got 300 loan officers in their company, they're probably not able to keep up with business, and their processors are getting beat up, basically. And then when it's a slower time of the year, like right now, they can probably do everything quickly. And I think we have to give grace to some of our lenders with that process. I know that there was a lot of when I was a lender, we had people who didn't take vacations and Thanksgiving and Christmas, and every year our processors and underwriters, were just working their fingers to the bone at the end of the year, and they hadn't taken their vacations. So it's just a time of the year sort of thing. So always check in with them. Oh, my lender can do this in 5 days. Well, they might, unless they have, a problem in the back office. So always check. It makes you a better professional, right? So any questions? You got me for 6 more minutes. You can ask me anything you want to.
Based upon what you just said, can a loan be locked? Can the loan interest rate be locked?
When?
Once we've got a contract?
Well, once you have a contract, that's when they would reach out to their lender and lock in the rate. And there's some lock and shop deals out there. And it also depends on how long between, again, this is more of a financing question than it is a contract question, but for our clients, typically you have to have an address to lock. There are some lock and shop programs out there, but normally they can't lock in until they have a property.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, guys, I'm going to take my 5 minutes back. I'm reclaiming my time.
Thank you, Brian.
Barbara, thank you for your comments. Thank you for everyone who participated. Thank you, Julius, for correcting me on the VA thing, because I was like, literally just looking at it wrong on my notes. So y'all have a great afternoon. And if you're going to family reunion this week, I will be there. Y'all have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.